And hello, everybody. Welcome in. Happy New Year from everybody here at SEC Talk. Hope everybody enjoyed their New Year, ringing in the New Year from 2024. Now we're into 2025 here in January at the end of the college football season. And at the end of our show here for SEC Talk, we're about to go into our off season, and you won't see us again until we do our March Madness bracket when we go through that. But for here on tonight's show, we're going to be recapping our final SEC draft, what we did, get the numbers on that. We'll also go through some of the bowl games that happened this past week, including the quarterfinals and what really got us here to the semifinals. And then we'll also look at some results from our picks. So Wade, how was your New Year?
Yeah, rung it in with the LSU Tigers in Houston and some good friends, and started it off with a win. And then this week, just been back to the work.
Back to the
Force,
grind.
unfortunately, pretty long time off, but it was good to kind of get back in the swing of things. And then caught a little bit of football throughout the week with the midday bowl games and stuff. That's nice, but yeah, not much to it.
Yeah, not much football really to be played here this college football season. We really just had the semifinal games and the national championship left. All the bowl games are wrapped up. The final bowl game was Buffalo versus Liberty in the Bahamas Bowl. I don't know why they put that last. It was kind of a dud bowl game to really to end this bowl season, but nonetheless, we enjoy what's comes on the TV. But for SEC talk, let's go ahead and dive into this. As always, we want to get you involved in the show. So if you have any questions pertaining to SEC football, I know there's really nothing really to talk about live action unless you're a Texas fan. But if you do have any questions, feel free to leave us a comment, and we will get to it after the hot topics segment of our show. All right, Wade, let's close the book here of the 2024 SEC Fantasy. A couple of weeks ago, we went through and did the draft of both the non-college football playoff bowls and also the college football playoff. We had only 3 teams to select from to make our team up. So just a reminder, this was how the teams were built. So we had 2 quarterbacks, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, and 2 defenses. So those are the rules. And now let's get into the final results. Wade, let's go ahead and go through your roster. We're going to just knock out your roster first for both the non-college football playoff and the college football playoff. So take us through how your non-college football playoff bowl roster did this season.
Yeah, so obviously one notable change here. We did make the running back substitution with Reuben Owens, but the rest of my lineup did play. Ryan Williams, geez, that's my first time seeing that stat total. Sure you didn't forget a 0 there at the end?
Nope, he had 8 yards. Michigan locked him up.
Well, that game was going on while I was at the Texas Bowl, so I saw the score, but I didn't really investigate much of the stat line. But it makes sense because Jalen Milroe was, by all accounts, pretty much a dud in his final game. Yeah, it just tough time down in Tampa for Alabama. They don't like that stadium. If you recall, they almost lost to South Florida there. But let's get into it. Garrett Nussmeier, he had a really good game. Both teams in that game just threw it up and down the field. There were some key secondary members missing for both Baylor and LSU. So the quarterbacks took advantage of that. Both quarterbacks threw for 300-plus yards. I think Baylor's might have even gotten to 400. But, 311, just what we needed. Reuben Owens, since my original pick did not play in this game, and obviously Le'Veon Moss has been hurt, A&M was down to their 3rd string running back, Reuben Owens, and he did all right. He had 62 yards in relief of Amari Daniels, who I originally picked. Ryan Williams, well, like we talked about, pretty much a doozy of a day for him. Just 8 yards. This Alabama offense struggled to get it going. And obviously Williams was a byproduct of that. The South Carolina defense, I mean, they played pretty well against Illinois, all things considered. It was the offense that really couldn't get things going. But defensively, I thought they held Illinois in check and, did about all I could ask for in a bowl game with some guys out. Their projected first round safety, Nick Amorawari, he sat out the second half, so that allowed for some yardage late. But nonetheless, that keeps me in the positives on the non-bowl side, so I'll take it.
Yep. I mean, without Ryan Williams and South Carolina's defense, yeah, South Carolina's defense, we'll get to them. That was definitely not so great performance by the Gamecocks defense. Then, like you mentioned, Jalen Milrow, I mean, having really two interceptions and a fumble in that first half of the game really set the Crimson Tide offense back in that game against Michigan's defense. So that's, yeah, I was surprised to see only 8 yards from Ryan Williams, but I was not surprised because I picked Michigan. That was like my best bet of the college football season was to take Michigan in that bowl game. But outside of that, really good performance by Garrett Nussmeier in the Texas Bowl. Like you mentioned, Baylor's quarterback had almost 400 passing yards, and Reuben Owens, even with the news with Mari Daniels not playing, and he still puts up 62 yards in a game that A&M controlled, and then the second half did not go their way. So that is the non-college football playoff bowl roster. Now let's go on to the college football playoff portion of your team. You went heavy Texas with Quinn Ewers as your quarterback, and Trevion Wisner your running back, and then you finished it off with Georgia's defense and Dante Thornton. So talk about how your playoff roster did.
Yeah, we covered those first three guys in last week's segment. But just to recap, and now these guys have played, or two of them have played a second game. Ewers actually had a better second showing. Wisner was still impressive, but these numbers are, of course, from the matchup with Clemson. But yeah, Texas is our lone SEC team that remains, and these two guys have been a big part of their playoff run. But for fantasy purposes, they got me just over 300 combined yards. Dante Thornton, it was a boomer bust pick, and it ended up being a bust. 14 yards for him. So my receivers combined for 22 yards. That's pretty bad. Defensively, though, I mean, Georgia, look, they got beat by, 2 possessions, but there just wasn't a lot of offense in that game. There was a special teams touchdown for Notre Dame. And Notre Dame was constantly working with the short field. So that played to Georgia's advantage here for me on SEC Fantasy. They had a respectable 244 yards. So, again, just in the – well, actually, I think I'm in the negatives on the bowl side, but that's to be expected when your quarterback doesn't get to 300 and your receiver gets 14. But luckily, my non-conference guys bailed me out a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. Your running backs carry the day for you, and your defenses. I mean, both teams lost, but Georgia's defense 244. I mean, Riley Leonard had 90 yards on the ground, 60 passing yards. So Georgia's defense kept them in the game. Trevion Wisner in that first game against Clemson, and then, like you mentioned, if you would have had Quinn Ewers in that second game against Arizona State, you probably would have strengthened your lead even more. So let's get to your final score, and you finished positive and over the 100, so 106. So how do you feel about your final score after this bowl season?
Hey, I'll take it. I mean, with the receivers not really contributing much, South Carolina losing a game that I thought they had in the bag, I think it's good to get in the positives, and only one replacement player. So I'll take it on that front too, because obviously there's a lot of really good players sitting out. So we were already picking from a pretty thin bunch, and then you never know if there's a last minute opt out, which could really throw off your pick. So just one, I'll take it, and it's a good finish to the season. I did not go into negatives at all, which is definitely an accomplishment, as you know, in this this challenge. But yeah, it was a good season.
Yeah, pretty good performance. 106. We'll see if it's beatable. So let's go ahead and get on to my roster first with the non-college football playoff bowls. Norris Sellers, he's been a fantasy MVP for us. 279 yards. Most of that actually was through the air. He didn't really have the performance that you thought that we have against this Illinois defense. So you got to give credit to Brett Bielema's staff getting a game plan, and they executed well, as South Carolina only put up 17 points in the offensive side of the ball. As you see, Sellers was 279. Caden Durham, he was the leading rusher for LSU, though. Josh Williams was the guy that got the touchdowns. He had 2 touchdowns in this game, but Caden Durham, I think in the future, he's going to have plenty more appearances here on SEC Fantasy. He's going to be the lead back for the Tigers. Another change that we had, I actually had Andrew Armstrong, but he did not play in this bowl game, so I went with Desmond James. And boy, he had a game. He only had 3 catches, but whenever he caught the ball, he went off for a long time. It was 137 yards against the Texas Tech defense, and this was pretty much a rout in the Liberty Bowl against the Red Raiders. And then Oklahoma's defense, definitely a disappointing pick, but 318 yards, even in the loss to Navy, is respectable, so I'll definitely take it. But I was hoping to get under 300 yards. But nonetheless, I think we had the same problems here. You didn't really pick that grade of a wide receiver, and then my running back kind of kept it. So pretty balanced so far for the non-college football playoff bowls. But I cannot say the same for the college football playoff. As this was a doozy. Going heavy Tennessee, I was already losing this
Too much
one.
orange on that screen, Tyler.
Yeah, too much. Yeah, really. All I did was pick orange on this one. Not a single Georgia player. It was probably a good thing I didn't pick any Georgia.
Yeah, we're going to have to redo these rules next year.
Yeah, definitely. Hopefully we get more SEC teams in here. That's what's going to make it easier for us. But Nico, not too great of a game. He only had like a little over 100 yards passing, and 40 of those came on the ground, so 151 yards. And they lost to Ohio State. But, hey, I mean, Tennessee played about as well as they could because of the way that Ohio State's playing. They just beat the snot out of Oregon. So if you're a Tennessee fan, you can't really say much about that. Another really change that we had, I picked Dylan Sampson, but he only played for like a play. He only had like 8 yards in this game, so he went ahead and got him with Peyton Lewis, the running back out of Tennessee. Considering the circumstances, not too bad a performance for him, 84 yards. Matthew Golden, he had a terrific game in game number 2. I mean, maybe we should be like, hey, if this team goes far, you get to pick and choose whatever game and yards you get, because he had a terrific game against Arizona State. He had that big catch in the first round against Clemson to get 249 yards. So not too shabby performance from Matthew Golden. Texas defense, it doesn't matter what round he took him in, they would have given up over 400 yards, but Texas defense 412. So really the only other defense available was Tennessee, and that would have been even worse. So not too much to choose from here on the defenses. I think really where I lost this one was Nico not performing to his ability, and then Matthew Golden not getting near as what I thought he was. But nonetheless, in the positives, I finished the final score with 33. So, Wade, you take the cake in the bowl season. And you take the cake, honestly. This was the tiebreaker because you mentioned it a couple of weeks back that on the season you had the total points. I had the head-to-head, and now you had the bowl season. So, Wade, I guess we'll just crown you as a 2024 SEC Fantasy Champ. I think you deserve it. Like you mentioned, you had no negatives. So we will take this momentum heading into the 2025 season. We will just have to maybe meet again because I like what we did this season with the SEC defenses, going through
the survivor.
And then getting all of the teams involved, picking a player from each offense. So we'll just have to maybe just think about some changes. I don't think really any rule changes because if you're trying to go to say like, hey, you get 6 points for a touchdown and all that.
It's a lot of math, my friend.
To the total yardage. So if you have any thoughts and ideas, definitely leave it down in the comments. We're definitely interested in what you guys are interested in. But I think nonetheless, it was a successful 2024 SEC fantasy season, and we will look forward to next season picking some new faces because we had a lot of Texas and Oklahoma players in their first year, and we're just hoping to get more players involved in next season. So that's going to close the book for SEC fantasy, and now let's turn our attention to some of our SEC teams finishing off their season either on a high note, on a low note. And obviously, with Texas being the lone SEC team in the college football playoffs. So let's get to the bowl games that happened this past week. Closing the door on 2024 and welcoming the new year in 2025. And the first game on New Year's Eve was between number 11 Alabama versus Michigan in the ReliaQuest Bowl down there in Tampa Bay. And in the first half, it was a torrential downpour, and you saw Jalen Milroe had 2 interceptions, which led to points for Michigan. Michigan was up 16-0 in that game. I was at the gym and I saw the score. I was like, I picked Michigan, but I did not think that they're going to be up 16-0 in the first half. Alabama's offense was able to climb back into this game to make it 16-10 going into the half. But you got to give credit to Michigan's defense. They pretty much did what they did against Ohio State. Ohio State in that game only had 10 points. Alabama only had 13 in this one. But Michigan's secondary was able to limit the big plays with Ryan Williams. You didn't really see Jalen Milroe beat Michigan's defense with their leg. So you got to give credit to Michigan. Not really going to say a terrific season. I think a terrific ending, though, for this Michigan program that's going to get a really talented quarterback in Bryce Underwood heading into the 2025 season. So a lot to be excited for if you're a Wolverines fan. But let's talk about the first year of Kalen DeBoer. You think that this was a win or a loss in your book for Kalen DeBoer in his first year in Tuscaloosa?
I don't think it was a bad year, but this is an ugly loss. And if you wanted to shut people up about it being a bad year, you needed to win this football game. I mean, I know you had some confidence in Michigan, and I know they finished the season strong, beating Ohio State and now Alabama. But this Michigan team has 3 defensive players that should be drafted in the first round this April. All of them sat out. They were down to their I would say their backup quarterback. I know they've been flip-flopping all year. Neither is great. They were down to their 3rd string running back. I mean, this team was depleted. And here you had Alabama clamoring that they should have been in the playoff. And you go out and score 13 points against a depleted defense. And now instead of Alabama going into the offseason coming off a 30-point win against Michigan and people saying, oh, what it could have been if they were in the playoff, he made it pretty clear that you shouldn't have been in the playoff discussion to begin with. It's just going to be a hard one to shake off, and I think it's going to be one that hurts them as they head into spring football. And there's just going to be a lot of noise because in 2 weeks we're not going to have any actual football to talk about, and in the offseason, we're going to nitpick coaches and transfer portal additions and the draft. And I just think all the noise around Alabama is going to be negative. So for that regard, I think this was a failure of a first season, even though it really wasn't that bad. You just got to finish it, and they did not.
Yeah, I think for my expectations, I had this team making the playoff and going 10-2. I think that with Kalen DeBoer coming from Washington, I think, obviously you're replacing a legend in the game with Nick Saban, but the roster was definitely there. With Jalen Milroe coming back, you had a guy like Ryan Williams where coming into the preseason, we didn't know what the expectation was because, the man's 17 and he just cruised to a really nice freshman season. We know the defense was going to be good, but the offense in the second half just did not show up in some games. You point to the Oklahoma game, now the Michigan game too. So without Jalen Milroe, this offense is going to be having a lot of question marks. And losing one of your top running backs to Michigan as well, he just committed to them. So Alabama heading into 2025, usually we get a nice grip on them, but heading into next season, I have no idea what the ceiling and floor of this team is going to be. I'm sure that as we go through the offseason, that's going to become more clear as the roster kind of takes shape heading into the spring game and then also the fall camp as well. So we will keep an eye on the Tide. Another team that was clamoring that they think that they were going to make the college football playoff with the South Carolina Gamecocks. They faced off against Illinois in the Cheez-It Citrus Bowl down there in Orlando, Florida. And once again, in the Big Ten versus SEC game, it was the Big Ten that came away with a victory, and it was the Fighting Illini 21-17. I think everyone's not really talking much of the game, but what happened between Brett Bielema and Shane Beamer, it was hilarious. But it was not hilarious was South Carolina's defense giving up 357 yards to an Illinois offense that wasn't really good throughout the whole entire season. The Norris Sailors, he had a good game as well. But I don't know. I feel like this was just going to be like a South Carolina statement victory. This was a team that felt slighted that they were left out of the college football playoff like Alabama, but like Alabama, their offense did not show it whatsoever. You got to give credit to Brett Bielema in Illinois. So, we were just talking about like South Carolina. They were a team that we were buying into. Are you still buying into the Gamecocks in 2025, or did this loss give you pause?
I don't think it makes me doubt them any less next year. This is a game I expected them to win, but I still think there's a lot of good momentum. Unlike Alabama, I think South Carolina exceeded expectations, and they lost to a ranked team that we knew had a really good defense. So I'm not wavering too much from them. I think that maybe we got a little in over our heads on the Gamecocks with how they finished the season. We did the same thing 2 years ago when they lost to Notre Dame to close out the year. And then they had a really bad next season. So hopefully that doesn't happen again. But no, I think all the pieces are there. You got your quarterback for sure. And keep in mind, Rocket Sanders didn't play in this game. So that was a pretty big opt out. Put a lot more on Sellers to provide not only through the air, but as South Carolina's run game. And Illinois didn't have to really respect the run game. But anyways, you got Sellers coming back. I think this team will need to look at adding a running back, or maybe they have some good recruits. I'm not sure. And then at receiver, hopefully that's an area they prioritize because I think that was the one thing holding them back. But I do think the defensive line will be great next year. I think the secondary will be pretty good. So I think this team is definitely a top half SEC team heading into the season. And I think they go as far as Sellers takes them. If he's in the Heisman discussion, this is probably a playoff team. If he's mediocre, this is probably a 8-4 team. That's kind of how I feel about him.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's get on to the next game, the Kinder's Texas Bowl down there in Houston, Texas, between the Baylor Bears and the LSU Tigers. And boy, if you liked offense, this was the bowl game for you as LSU won this 144-31. And this was pretty much a battle between Garrett Nussmeier and Sword Robinson. Robinson almost had 400 yards. Garrett Nussmeier had over 300 yards passing. And you pretty much saw everything. You saw a rushing touchdown from LSU. You saw a 100-yard kickoff return. You pretty much saw everything in this one. But so you like what you saw on the offensive side of the ball, even with all the opt-outs. You didn't have two of your best tackles with Emory Jones and Will Campbell opting out in this bowl game, and then you didn't have Kyron Lacey and Mason Taylor. I think that you really saw Chris Hilton Jr. really step up in this one. He had almost two big touchdowns. They overruled it. He was down at the one, but I think you were really impressed with Chris Hilton. Aaron Anderson didn't have his best game. He had a couple of drops that could have led to some big plays for LSU. But Wade, you were in the stands. How was this bowl game? And did you get a rack of ribs while you were there?
No ribs for me. But that was, it's always fun to see what these games do now to liven it up afterwards in the post game. But yeah, plenty of offense. I mean, Baylor honestly could have had another touchdown or so on the board, and this could have been a one possession game. But LSU came to play on special teams. They had the touchdown returned by Xavier Jones, and then they also had or Xavier Thomas rather, and then they had the pick six. What was that? Devon Key that had the pick
Devon
six.
Keys.
Yeah, so that's going to be a new guy for next year. He kind of came on the scene late as a true freshman. So lots to like. I mean, we knew that the defense was depleted.
Even more
I think
with
the big question mark was that the offensive line, and Nussmeier just got the ball out so quick it didn't matter. So I think it went as well as it could for LSU. I mean, minus the Whit Weeks injury, you got through without any injuries and you won pretty convincingly. So I think it was all in all pretty good.
Yep, all in all, good performance. I think that injury could have been much worse. Now it's a dislocation.
Yeah.
He already had a surgery, so I think that he's going to be ready to go once the season goes. Because like we talk about every year, it's not an easy opener, and you got to go on the road to Clemson, and we already got the news.
Probably the toughest one we've had.
Yeah. Kate Klubnik's going to be back for that offense, so that's looking like going to be a top 15 matchup if I were to guess. I think that Clemson, they're going to be a top 10 team. They're bringing in a lot of stars back on their team, so that's definitely going to be whoever wins that one's going to be set up for the rest of the season, so we'll definitely get into that. And now let's go on to the Trans-Perfect Music City Bowl down there in Nashville, another SEC versus Big Ten battle, and this time the SEC won a game, and it was the Missouri Tigers in a 27-24. This was a back-and-forth battle. Missouri didn't really see much of their stars in this one. Luther Burden opted out. He already announced that he's declaring for this bowl game. So you saw some of the other receivers step up. Missouri's defense, I think, played fantastic, even in the circumstances. So Missouri, I think, really terrific season for them. I think they finished 9-3 in the regular season. Now you finish with 10 wins, back-to-back 10-win seasons for Eli Drinkwitz's squad. And you're going to pretty much play the same SEC schedule next season, though you won't have Luther Burden and some of your key offensive weapons. And then the defense as well, you're going to be losing some. So I think that Missouri probably heading into next season, not going to have as much hype as they did this season. You could probably say they're a little bit disappointment heading into this 2024 season. But all in all, how would you grade Missouri's season in 2024?
I mean, I had them potentially being a playoff team, so it was a little lackluster. But I mean, they didn't really do anything terribly wrong. But when we saw them play good competition, I mean, it wasn't even close, minus the South Carolina game. So, I'd give them a B plus. I mean, I thought it was a good effort. I mean, you could give them an A. They didn't do anything wrong, but I think that an A season in my book would have been them in the playoffs.
Yeah, absolutely. So big win for Missouri in the Music City Bowl. Now let's go on to the next and final bowl game they're going to be discussing before we get to the playoff recap. And that was the Tax Slayer Gator Bowl in Jacksonville between Duke versus number 14 in Ole Miss. And we just talked about the college football playoff team hopefuls of Alabama and South Carolina laying an egg. Ole Miss did not. No problem for Ole Miss. I mean, you really saw Jackson Dart and what he's capable of in this offense. So you saw Juice Wells make a couple of big plays. You didn't obviously see Trey Harris in this game. You saw US's Bentley get a couple of big plays for this Ole Miss offense. But this was a pretty much over, honestly, before this game started, because we know that on Duke's side, they didn't have Malik Murphy. He's already in the transfer portal. Duke, this was just an overmatch for them. This was just an Ole Miss team that just wanted to prove a point that they belonged in the college football playoff. But I think as we look back on this season, obviously Ole Miss fans are going to be disappointed, especially because this was like the best Ole Miss team that Lane Kiffin has had in quite some time. I mean, especially Jackson Dart, the players that you had in the transfer portal, and then also the defensive line that you had as well, and the strides that they're able to make throughout this season. So do you see this Ole Miss team with what they're losing heading into the 2025 season, a little bit of drop off for the Rebels?
I think like Missouri, this was their year to do it. So in that regard, I think there are a lot of questions about what they're going to be able to do next year. I think their receiving core is going to be, taking a hit, obviously. But I am intrigued at the prospects of what is it, Austin Harris that's going to be playing quarterback next year?
I think Austin
Simmons. Yep. I mean, obviously they believe in him. If they weren't really scouting the transfer market, he was a 5-star early enrollee, kind of like Ryan Williams. So, yeah, I mean, he could kind of be the game changer for them. But yeah, I see him kind of taking a step back. I mean, I think they're kind of right there with A&M and LSU, where you wouldn't be surprised if they made a run. But I don't think you can group them with Texas and Georgia, teams like that.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's go on now to the college football playoff games that happen in the SEC. So let's start with the first one in the Chick-fil-A Peach Bowl. And this was a crazy game between number 5 Texas versus number 4 Arizona State. And just to note, if you had a top 4 seed, well, you lost. Every top 4 seed lost in this one. It wasn't close for some of the teams outside of Arizona State. Georgia obviously lost by double digits. Oregon got the doors blown off of them. And then Boise State got the doors blown off of them against Penn State there. So maybe something to consider. I don't know if it's something to do about already playing the game or not, but it was the Longhorns prevailing against Arizona State 39-31. It was looking like this was going to be a Texas rout early in the first half, as Texas, like in the span of like 30 seconds, was already up 14-0. You know, all right, Arizona State doesn't belong. They play in the Big 12 and all that, but you got to give credit to Arizona State, and specifically Cam Scatterboot, and can't forget about Sam Levitt. I mean, that man is only a freshman. So Arizona State is definitely going to be talented on offense. Obviously, they are going to be losing Cam Scatterboot heading into next season. But Arizona State pretty much played about as well as you could against this Texas team. Texas offense definitely played a more complete game. You know, going up against Clemson in the first game of the playoff, it was a good defense. Arizona State's defense is also talented. This game went down into overtime because Auburn missed 2 field goals that likely was going to seal the deal for the Longhorns. But Texas, in overtime, they were able to strike quickly. And then on 4th and 13, Quinn Ewers threw an absolute dot to Matthew Golden, the guy who I picked in the first round. He went off in overtime. And then you saw Quinn Ewers literally on the next play go to the tight end. And that was pretty much all she wrote, as Arizona State threw an interception. So that was honestly the game of the bowl season, in my opinion. You know, you talk about like the 5 overtime game, the 6 overtime game, but honestly, thank God for this game, because outside of that, the college football playoff has been absolutely just like blowouts after blowout after blowout. Give your overall thoughts on this game. You really got to like the fight for Arizona State, but you've been pretty high on Texas, so you probably aren't too surprised that Texas is moving on.
Well, I mean, the Texas offense came alive, which we've been waiting on, and they were so close to putting together a complete game. But I mean, just like they did against Clemson, that they let up a lot of points in the second half, and you can't do that to Ohio State because they're going to probably put up points on you in the first half, which neither of the teams they've played so far did, or not much of it. So I don't know. I still believe in this team, but I mean, they kind of got lucky in a way, but also they could have won this one in regulation with a field goal. And I've seen Brett Auburn make some really long kicks, so that was kind of a head scratcher. But oh man, I thought Arizona State was going to pull it off. I really did. They got it down to 4th down in overtime, and they hit Matthew Golden on that touchdown. I mean, that was a dagger, and I thought it was really smart to take another deep shot to start the next overtime. I mean, just gash them while you can. But hey, survive in advance. Texas is playing in Arlington now. That's huge. They probably thought they were going to be playing Oregon, but they're playing Ohio State, who's as hot as anybody. I mean, it kind of feels like a national championship, I'm not going to lie.
Yeah, absolutely. That's going to be an exciting game out there in Arlington, Texas. And I'm going to ask you, Arizona State on that last drive, you think that was, if you were the referee, would you call that targeting or not?
I don't know who said it, but I think it was Connor Stallions, actually.
No.
He said that there really should be a distinguish. They should distinguish between like a flagrant targeting and like just an incidental targeting. Like you got to prioritize player health, and that's why it's being called. But it's kind of like we have roughing the kicker, running into the kicker. If you touch the kicker, you're going to get a flag, but it might not be 15 yards and an ejection. Maybe it's like a 10-yard penalty, and the player can stay in the game. And if he gets a second one, he's tossed. And I think that is kind of where that play lies, in my opinion. I don't think it was like a malicious leading with the crown of the helmet, spearheading the football. But I do think it met the criteria to be called. And if it had, I mean, Arizona State had like a 40-yard field goal that could have won it. And their kicking game has been pretty bad all year too. So there's no guarantee it's made. But yeah, I think by the definition of the rule, they probably should have called that.
Yeah, definitely. That was the talk on Twitter, but Texas nonetheless gets the job done. And let's go on to the final game that we're going to be discussing here, and that was the All-State Sugar Bowl between number 7 Notre Dame and number 2 Georgia, and it was the Fighting Irish. Went down to the Big Easy and got the victory over the Bulldogs 23-17. to 10. And this was a field goal battle early. Mitch Jeter, you talk about the field goal struggles. Notre Dame had the field goal struggles pretty much the whole entire season, but you got to give credit to Jeter. He kicked two field goals. They went up 6-3. And ultimately, it was a flip flop. You thought that, okay, Georgia's going to just be down 6-3, and then boom, Notre Dame gets a touchdown to make it 13-3, and they get a pick six, make it a 20-3. I was like, at the half, I was like, okay, Notre Dame, we see you. This isn't the Notre Dame team that we're used to seeing in the college football playoff, but really, Georgia's offense was non-existent without Carson Beck being there. Gunnar Stockton didn't play that bad of a game. It was his receivers. They couldn't catch the ball. It was the same that happened with George Pickens, the Steelers, in this game against the Bengals. They just could not catch the ball whatsoever. They also couldn't run the ball either. I mean, Trevor Etienne couldn't really get that big of a runs that we saw him make in the SEC championship game against Texas. So disappointing finish for this Georgia team. They won the SEC championship. Only loss came to Alabama in the regular season. So disappointing finish once again for Kirby Smart. But you got to give credit to Marcus Freeman. I mean, this was a team that everybody was burying after they lost to Northern Illinois in week number 2 after beating Texas A&M on the road. And this team went undefeated, and this defense is playing elite level of football. Offense, it isn't great. I mean, Ryan Leonard only had 60 passing yards. He had 90. He's definitely got to throw for more than 60 yards passing if they do want to beat Penn State. But if you got a guy like Jeremiah Love in the backfield, but this Notre Dame team definitely surprised some. If you didn't go with Georgia, I was the lone one that went with Georgia. Y'all went with Notre Dame. So, Wade, I know that you weren't surprised since you did pick Notre Dame, but you have to be surprised that Georgia only put up 10 points in this game.
Yeah, I thought that the run game would at least show up for Georgia, and they were sloppy on special teams and defense to an extent. So if they wanted to win this game, they certainly couldn't shoot themselves in the foot in those areas because we knew points were going to be limited, but I thought between Etienne and Nate Frazier, they would be able to assert themselves on the ground, and it just really wasn't the case. Etienne's tenure at Georgia has just kind of been disappointing, to be honest. They thought they were bringing in Nick Chubb or Todd Gurley, and I mean, hardly. But for Notre Dame, I mean, look, this team's hot, and Penn State's hot, so that's going to be a really fun matchup to watch. I think Georgia, just the injuries caught up to them, and not having a true, I guess, arsenal of weapons at receiver. I mean, maybe if they had some of these receivers they've had in the past, you could get by with your backup quarterback. But when you got the backup throwing to guys that are not up to the Georgia standard, I mean, it just wasn't a recipe for success. That's why I flipped to Notre Dame at the last minute. And they got the job done.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good win for the Fighting Irish, and that is it for SEC Bowl Games recap. And now let's go on, update our SEC Talk Bowl Game picks. We've been keeping track on the Capital One Bowl Mania on the ESPN app. Let's see if anything's changed. And nope, Wade, you already won because there's only 3 games left, and I'm down 5 games, and Jacob's down 6 games. So, Wade, terrific.
I think you might have gone on mute there, T. The joys of technology.
Yeah, the joys of technology, man. All right. We're back. Let's try to get
But
this.
I think what you said is Wade is the best ever at picking bowl games.
Pretty much. Pretty
we
much what
all
I was
are.
saying is this one is pretty much over since there's only 3 games left to play. You're at 30-14. Chet and I are at 25-19. Jacob is at 24-20. So you got to feel pretty good where you're sitting at 30-14 and looking like you're pretty much running away with the competition here.
Yeah, I mean, look, some of these were just a toss up. And I think I got like the Iowa State victory and the BYU victory and stuff like that just kind of gave me the leg up. But as of late, I mean, they've been getting tougher and tougher.
Yep.
And hey, look, to go 500 with these bowl games, not knowing who's playing and all that, I think anything above 500 is good. So hats off to everybody in our league.
Yeah, we will definitely take that. And let's go ahead and go to the college football playoff semifinal games and pick them. We are pretty much now down to what it was a couple of years back with the 4-team playoff. We started with 12, and now we're down to the final 4. And let's start off with the first game, which will kick off on Thursday night. Down there in beautiful Miami, Florida, in the Capital One Orange Bowl between number 7 Notre Dame and number 6 Penn State. How the two teams got here? Well, it wasn't that hard for them because Notre Dame cruised to a win against Indiana in round 1. And then in round number 2, they defeated Georgia 23-10 in the All-State Sugar Bowl. Penn State, they routed SMU in the first round, then routed Boise State. I mean, Penn State, people are saying they got gifted it, and they really took part of that path, really cruised to a win there. So he got in the Capital One Orange Bowl between Penn State and Notre Dame, who will be the first team that punches their ticket to Atlanta for the national championship.
Yeah, two teams that are led by their defense and two teams that wouldn't have been in a 4-team playoff, I don't think. I mean,
Yep.
gosh, I don't know who would have made the top 4. We can discuss that in a little bit, but yeah, two teams that have really benefited from this playoff system. But I'm going with Penn State because they just look like the more complete team. Like you said, Riley Leonard had 60 yards passing. I just can't pick them with confidence in that situation. I think Drew Aller, I mean, look, he might need to reconsider his decision to come back to Penn State. If they win it all, I think, go pro. I mean, you've accomplished everything you need to. I think he could easily be the top quarterback in this class. He's got a cannon, and it's coming out at the right time. I mean, this Penn State team looks very complete.
Yeah, absolutely. This is going to be an exciting game, and I'm definitely going to be watching this one here on Thursday night. I think it's going to be the battle of defenses here. This is going to be a defensive game, probably not too many points. I think the winner gets into the mid-20s here, maybe the low 30s. But they're going to rely on their running game here. I know that you mentioned with Drew Aller. He's been playing fantastic through this playoff stretch here for Penn State. And Notre Dame, Riley Leonard, I mean, obviously you do want to trust his capability on the ground, but you're going to have to open it up here against this Penn State secondary. Injury to note here, Abdul Carter is questionable, so that would definitely be a big loss for Penn State. But honestly, he's going to be playing this one. I mean, this is a trip to the national championship on the line, so we'll see. We'll keep an eye on that injury report, but I'm also going to go with Penn State in this one. I trust their rushing attack more with Craytron Allen and Nick Singleton, the way that Drew Aller's been playing. So give me Penn State in like a 24-20 type of game. I think it's going to be a low, grinded out game for 4 quarters, and Penn State is going to be the first team to make it to Atlanta for the Natty. Is Chet going to make it a clean sweep? No, he's not. He's going to go with the luck of the Irish, go with Notre Dame and Marcus Freeman's squad, punching their ticket to the ATL. So we're already in disagreement so far here with 2 of us on Penn State and the other going the different direction and going with Notre Dame. The second semifinal, which will be happening on Friday night, is the Goodyear Cotton Bowl down there in Arlington, Texas, between the 8 seed Ohio State and the 5 seed Texas. I mean, a lot of parity in this 12-team playoff. None of the 4 seeds made it to the semifinal round. Ohio State, I mean, man, they are definitely the favorite. Vegas, pretty much, if you take them right now to win the national championship, is minus odds. But Will Howard has really turned it on. Jeremiah Smith has turned it on. This defense is on another level. So Texas, a lot to deal with, especially on the defensive side. They really have to start off fast if you are Texas in this one. But do you think that the home crowd will fuel Texas, or do you think that Ohio State moves on and makes it an all Big Ten championship?
I can't hop off the Longhorn bandwagon now. I mean, I've been planting a flag for this team all season. Yes, Ohio State is on fire right now. And yes, Texas can't play a complete football game, but the talent's there and they are playing close to home. So I'm going with the Longhorns in this one. But I wouldn't be surprised to see Ohio State win. I mean, this offense is as good as any of the teams that remain. And, I think that this playoff system's great because they're a team that otherwise wouldn't have been included. And I think they very well could win a national championship. But I'm going with Texas. I think Ewers shows out, in front of the home crowd and gets them to Atlanta.
Yeah, I think it's going to be two different ball games here. You're going to have a low scoring game on the other, and here's going to be your high scoring shootout in this one. I know that Ohio State's defense has been playing well, but I mean, this game is pretty much a home game for Texas. I mean, I know that Ohio State fans, they're going to travel well, but they're not going to be able to invade AT&T Stadium here. So I think that is going to be a little bit of a factor just to keep in mind when you're making these picks. But I mean, obviously on paper, the way that Ohio State's been playing, that is the popular pick here. But Wade, we got to have at least one SEC team make it to the national championship, right? So give me the Longhorns. We can't have a goose egg here for our conference. So I think nothing against Ohio State. They've just really been playing hot at the right time there. But I think that they get extinguished by Quinn Ewers in this offense. So look for Matthew Golden to have a big game. I think that the 1-2 punch with Jaden Blue and Quintravion Wisner has been big in this playoff run. So I think that Texas wins the high scoring shootout down there in the Longhorn State. Is Chet going to agree with us and go with and back the conference? Nope. He's going to go with the Buckeyes of Ohio State. And really, you can't blame them the way that they've been playing. So Chet is either going to go 0-2, 1-1, or who knows what of his picks. But Wade and I are in agreements. And Chet, I guess he's just trying to make up some on you. Will it be enough? We will have to see. But those are our college football playoff semifinal picks. Now let's get on to some hot topics. Let's get back here to the SEC. Pretty much all news here that we have so far. Georgia quarterback Jaden Rashada is once again entering the transfer portal. I believe he started out at Arizona State and then transferred to Georgia, and now he's back in the transfer portal. So with Carson Beck leaving, now Jaden Rashada entering the transfer portal, how's this Georgia offense looking in your eyes and heading into next season?
I think he was at Florida, then Arizona State.
You know what? Transfer portal is wacky. I don't even know who's at where at this point.
Yeah, maybe he gets 2 college football playoff rings for being at Georgia and Arizona State. Yeah, I mean, sorry, I forgot the initial question because I got caught up in Rashada. But I guess that's a sign they're going with Stockton next year, even though he's kind of average. I don't know.
Be looking. What?
I said, do you think that's a sign that they're going with Stockton for next year?
I mean, if I feel like it, they already made their decisions if he is making transfer portal. Because, I mean, Jaden Rashada, if you don't forget, I mean, this guy was a 5-star quarterback. He was the number 1 quarterback in his class. I don't even know where he committed. I think he committed to Arizona State, then went to Florida. It was like a back-and-forth battle between the two schools. So I think that if this guy is going into the transfer portal, it probably is on Gunnar Stockton. And like I mentioned, Gunnar Stockton played really well in the Sugar Bowl. I think that this Georgia team is missing some talented wide receivers, honestly, because you do have some young freshmen. I mean, Trevor Etienne honestly did not have the season that Georgia fans thought that he was because he was dominant with Florida. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm not too high on Georgia heading into next season, really, with this offense, unless they're able to get some more weapons at the wide receiver position. Both with the freshmen coming in and also in the transfer portal. So I'm just going to wait. Honestly, I don't even know who's going to be starting at quarterback. I guess it's going to be Gunnar Stockton, but I definitely think it raises some questions. So if Jaden Rashada leaving, that maybe Kirby Smart just like, all right, we're already going to go with Gunnar Stockton. So we will just have to see as spring ball continues. But some more quarterback news. Ex-Gamecocks quarterback, another quarterback that's just going in and out of the transfer portal, and is Robbie Ashford. He started out at Auburn and went to South Carolina. Now he's heading to the ACC in Wake Forest. So do you like or hate the move for Ashford here?
I mean, I think he's just trying to get on where he can,
Good team,
and make a little
you'll be
extra
the
NIL
starter
money.
there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know much about Wake Forest, but good for him. I mean, he wasn't going to start, obviously, at South Carolina next year with Sellers, and I don't fault him for going to South Carolina this year because he plays similar to Sellers, and if Sellers didn't, make that leap like he did, then maybe he would have lucked his way into getting some playing time for South Carolina. But I think it's a good move for a guy that's at the end of his career.
Yeah, absolutely. Some coordinator news. Alabama's co-defensive coordinator is not going to be returning. I can't blame him because Alabama's defense down the stretch, has had their games. I mean, the Vanderbilt game, the Oklahoma game, obviously. The Michigan game, they did well. I mean, they kept them in the ball game, but this wasn't like the Alabama defense that we saw in years past with Nick Saban. So maybe there'll be some changes on the coordinator, and they'll be able to bring in some talent in the transfer portal. So we will see about Alabama. I'm not really going to go much into that because the season's already over, and we could just talk about it all season. So I'm just going to wait until the pen hits the paper. So let's go on to the next one. I saw this. Somebody posted that Jackson Dart was the most impactful transfer in college football history. Do you agree with that? I'm sure you're going to say no. I know the player that you're going to say that's more impactful. So go ahead.
I mean, I think you could name 3 that won a Heisman, 4 if you count Cam Newton. But yeah, I think look at what Oklahoma did with Kyler Murray and Baker Mayfield. They both win Heismans. Then take it up a level. Joe Burrow comes in, wins a Heisman and a national championship. All of them play quarterback. So what are we missing here? I mean, Dart didn't win a Heisman or a national championship. So no.
All right. Well, that was a quick question. So that is it for our hot topics, and that is it for our show.
What's your thought? I mean, I think he's the most impactful for Ole Miss.
Yeah,
but
for the team,
not on
yes.
the national.
Of all time, no. I mean, obviously, is Joe Burrow, the way that he was able to flip that team on his head. I was like, you turned a Stone Age offense into the best offense that you'll ever see in college football. So that's about all the sample size.
And we didn't even talk about Jaden Daniels. I mean,
yeah, we didn't. Yeah, he also has a Heisman as well as that you brought up with Baker Mayfield and Kyler Murray. So that is it for our SEC talk for the college football playoff semifinal preview and picks. We will have one more final show. We will preview the national championship, whether Texas is in it or not. So we will preview the national championship next week. That game will be on January 20th. Then we'll also do a little early predictions for the 2025 season, and we'll sneak in some NFL picks as well. We'll have the playoffs going on, so we will make our picks after wild card weekend is wrapped up. So we appreciate everybody for tuning in to this week's show, and we will see y'all next week as we close the book here on the 2024-2025 season in the conference. So we appreciate everybody for tuning in. And for SEC Talk, so long for now.